Hello, 7th grade. Today we start a brand new unit. I was pretty happy with the test results. Some of you showed mastery of a lot of the content that we covered the first 3 to 4 weeks. Some of you we're going to be working and continuing to working on improving those skills. So we are moving on though. We are going to start proportions. I love proportions. They're fun. I have a great strategy, something that will make it hopefully easy for you. But I want to start off with ratios, unit rate, and proportions. It's really all the same thing, okay? So you can pause this, but I'm going to move to page 23 and 24. Okay, you have a foldable, okay? You don't have to glue it in right now. What I want to do is let's talk about each one, okay? When you have a ratio is a comparison of two or more numbers. Right? You commonly hear the teacher, oh, it's a ratio of 1 to 2. One student out of every 2 students maybe has glasses, okay? Or 1 out of 3 has braces. And so we're comparing those two numbers, especially one out of it could be out of a whole, but part to part as well. So the ratio of stars to circles is 2 to 3, just in the above example. And the way that we express it, there are 3 ways and that we can write it. We can write it with a colon. Okay, for example, 2, like the above, 2 stars to every 3 circles. We can also verbalize it with the word 2. I can say 2 to 3. And a lot of you are like, Ms. Kowalski, we did this last year. Yep, you did. That's why I'm going to go quickly through this. By the end of the lesson, we are doing proportions. We are only going to spend 1 day on it, okay? And you can also write it as a fraction. And a lot of you knew this when we were converting a fraction to a decimal. A lot of you understood that the fraction, for example, 2 to 3. All right. We can also have a rate. Okay, a rate is a ratio. It's a special kind of ratio comparing 2 different numbers. Wait a minute, comparing 2 numbers with different unit rates. No? Not sure what they were asking for here. I apologize, and I'll fill you in. But basically, on a ratio that is a unit rate. When you, for example, if you're driving 100 miles and you do 2 hours, that equals 50 miles per hour, okay? So a unit rate tells the rate in lowest terms or the amount for 1. You're looking to find, per hour, per mile, per unit, per dollar, per second. You always want the denominator to be a 1, okay? And last but not least, we have a proportion. A proportion is actually an equation. Yep. And it shows that 2 ratios are equal. Okay, so for example, and you learned these fancy little butterflies. I know. Please do not let me see a butterfly with cute little spots and little antennas. Middle schoolers, we don't use butterfly anymore. The way that we determine if it is a proportional relationship or not is we take the cross product. Okay? Because really, and I don't want to go into why until we go into equations. So when we do, we are going to multiply, so 25 times 40 is equal to 10 times 100. Now, 25 times 40, put your thinking caps on. What do you think? Well, what's 25 times 4? Yeah, it's 100. And then I add that 0, 1,000. What is 10 times 100? 1,000. Does 1,000 equal 1,000? Yes, it is proportional, okay? So in a proportion, if the ratios are equivalent, If they are equivalent, because we didn't know in the beginning, then the cross products, remember that the product is the answer for multiplication. So the cross, I know, back to that little butterfly, they're equal. Think of equal fractions. Okay, you can try, for example, 1/2 is equal to 2/4. And we know that it is, isn't it? Right? Because really it's simply not, it's not simplified. So the cross product would be 2 times 2 is equal to 1 times 4. Does 4 equal 4? Yes. So that means that it is proportional. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to glue this down in your journal sideways. Okay? And then you have a green sheet of paper. And so I flew through that because really all this was a review of what you learned last week. We're going to spend, last year, sorry. And we're going to spend a good 2.5 weeks on this, okay? Getting into percentages. And guess what? It is all the same strategy, okay? So on the left side of the page, I want to go over one problem. And the strategy that we use, actually, let's do this. I'm sorry, we're on page 24. I want you to go ahead and turn the page. And that way I have the strategy to the right and then the word problems that we're going to work out on the left. Okay? All right. So a proportion, now we're getting into the 7th grade. And let's practice. Miss Kowalski uses tic-tac-toe. And until you're good at tic-tac-toe, you're going to use tic-tac-toe. All right. Different teachers use different things. I like tic-tac-toe, and the beauty is we're going to use it for probably 6 weeks. Everybody knows a tic-toe grid, okay? Last year, you put the words here, right? And then what you know and what you do not know. All we do is you're going to have ratio number 1 and then ratio number 2. And it's in a fraction form, okay? This right here is extremely important. Sorry. Okay? So I'm going to pretend that we have how many students. I'm going to put a total here. Total number of students is going to be 680 students. Okay? And I want to know, the part would be students with siblings. So at Lake Air, we have 680. But I also know that I have a ratio number 1 that says that for every 10 students at Lake Air, 6 have a sibling, okay? And I want to find out, so how many total students have a sibling at Lake Air? And all we're going to do, that's right, so this was ratio number 2. And then when you get really, really good, you can narrow it down to a 4 square, which is a cross product. Please make sure you put your labels. I see so many mistakes just because they never had their labels, okay? And then they mix up their numbers. So please, 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 it's extremely important. Now, one thing that I love about the tic-tac-toe board is you can always reduce numbers, vertically or horizontally. Okay, you reduce. Guys, please reduce. You do not want to work with big numbers because that's how accidents or mistakes happen. Okay? So, the purpose of reducing is I do not have to work with big numbers. So when we solve a proportion, well, first, I'm sorry, we're going to reduce. So do I have a common factor here? Is there a common factor with the beauty of anything with a 0? I can divide both of these numbers by 10. So that means that I can, if I divide by 10, that 0 automatically disappears. What's 10 divided by 10? 1. What's 680 divided by 10? 68. So those are my new numbers, 1 and 68. But I'm going to go ahead and leave those zeros crossed out like that. So when we solve a proportion, we are looking for the cross product now. And I know that I can go ahead and go do the cross product and solve when my variable is diagonal to a 1. Okay? So that means that 1 times x is equal to 6 times 68. Remember, parentheses as well as this dot can tell us to multiply and give us the product. So 1 times x, x. Now I'm going to show something. Why is Miss Kowalski drawing a line over here? And I haven't emphasized this, but I am now. This is called your chicken scratch. I was so grading your test. It was crazy. You had work everywhere. I want everyone to start little work like this. Think of it as your work of art. This is your Picasso, okay? Do not mess up the Picasso. You want exactly what you need when you're working on your problem. Chicken scratch is when you're doing some numbers. Oh, what was 8 times 6? What was 10 divided by 2? So here, I'm going to do my chicken scratch. Going over 68 times 6, 6 times 8, 48, carry your 4, 6 times 6, 36 plus 4 is what? 408. Now I'm going to take my answer and put it over here. And you always cross out your chicken scratch, okay? I promise you it works. It really, really helps students when you start, they're like, oh my goodness, where was I? So what this means is that if I were to put this back into my proportion, right? I'm gonna leave the labels out. This was number 1, this was number 2. And a lot of you guessed it. If you were to multiply this times this and this times this, they would be equal. And I'm going to let you find out. And it should be equal. Okay? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this video or stop it. This is a basic information for solving proportions. And on another video, we're going to model 5 of them together, and then for independent work, you'll have 10 problems by yourself. All right, see you in a little bit.